When studying logical fallacies, one fallacy you may have come across is the appeal to authority fallacy. This fallacy occurs when someone asserts that a statement regarding a subject is true solely because an authority on that subject said it is true. In standard form, the fallacy would look like this. Premise 1, person X is an authority on a subject. Premise 2, person X says something pertaining to that subject. Premise 3, everything that an authority on a subject says pertaining to that subject is true. Conclusion, what person X is saying is true. However, does this mean that we should never consider what an authority on a particular subject says? This is where I would say that the appeal to authority fallacy has a bit of a gray area to it. To further my point, I would like to discuss a couple of nuances. I would say it is correct to assert that just because an authority on a subject says something pertaining to that subject, that doesn't make it become true. They should provide evidence. Because I said so is never enough. Not to mention, even authorities on a subject are fallible, thus, even what they say is not guaranteed to be true. However, a problem arises when someone misinterprets the appeal to authority fallacy by presuming that it is always wrong to consider testimony from authorities. If a person has expertise in a particular subject, I would say it is often reasonable to consider them as a good source of information pertaining to that particular subject. You probably do this in your day-to-day life. Why is that? Well, because they are individuals who have dedicated many years, or even their lives, to studying the subject in question. Not to mention, there are probably many technical nuances that lay people may not be aware of regarding the subject. Authorities on the subject typically have the background knowledge and experience to understand their subject's body of information. This means that you can think of authorities on a given subject as already doing your homework for you and giving you their answers to it. But this raises the question, how can I believe that their answers are correct, especially when other authorities on the subject may disagree with them? To resolve this problem, I would first like you to keep the following in mind. Authorities on a subject typically interpret the available information to the best of their ability and draw well-informed conclusions about what is likely to be true. As more information becomes available, they revise their conclusions accordingly. Given that, perhaps a better way of looking at appealing to authority is to appeal to the consensus of authorities if there is a consensus. If all or the vast majority of the other authorities on the subject come to the same conclusion as the authority in question, that can give good support to the conclusion being made. If there isn't a consensus, then you could withhold judgment until a consensus is reached. Or perhaps you could do your own research. Also, please ensure that the consensus of authorities on the subject has a reliable track record of communicating true statements about the subject in question. If they don't, then I would say to thoroughly examine their assertions. Finally, it is important to note that being unqualified or going against the consensus does not necessarily mean that a person is wrong. Similarly, being qualified does not guarantee that a person is right. However, it is important to consider the likelihood of being correct. Put another way, focus on the person's reasoning and not so much on their qualifications. A reasoning should be evaluated on its own merit and not the individual who is presenting it. Putting this all together, here is a correct way to look at appealing to authority. Premise 1, person X says something pertaining to a subject. Premise 2, the consensus of authorities on the subject agrees with what person X is saying. Premise 3, the consensus of authorities on the subject has a reliable track record of communicating true statements about the subject in question. Conclusion, what person X is saying is probably true. Even then, please do still remember to take care and think critically.